And now I am delighted to introduce our moderator, Stephanie Griffith. Stephanie is a longtime journalist living in the Washington, D.C. area. She worked most recently as an opinion editor for CNN and has written for the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, Washington Monthly, and a number of other publications. Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this IIJ webinar on pitching and writing opinion pieces. Freelancers sometimes overlook the opinion page as a possible landing spot for their writing. It's not hard to see why this might be the case. Many of us working in commentary come to it after years on the news side, where we're taught that we must strictly adhere to neutrality in tone and that our articles should offer opposing sides of any issue. We're not generally encouraged to suffuse our writing with our own views. If this is your situation, if you come from news, allow me to encourage you to unleash your innermost opinionated self. Consider pitching a piece to an opinion section, because on the commentary page, your opinions are not just allowed, they're welcome. They're actually sought out by editors. I don't believe I'm overstating the case when I say that many opinion editors rely on a considerable number of pieces that come unsolicited from freelancers, especially first-person narrative essays. Many of us work in volume. We're constantly commissioning and juggling multiple pieces at a time. That's one reason why opinion editors are not only receptive to smart pitches from freelancers, we're often delighted to get them. Now, every publication is a little different, but this is how things generally worked in my experience. Some event of note will have happened the day before or during the overnight hours. I'd wake up at the crack of dawn, get up to speed on what was going on in the news, and say to myself about whatever event had happened, this is an interesting story. I wonder if there is an opinion take here. And if there is, what are the possible angles that we might explore? And just as importantly, who might be a potential writer for a piece? Then I would rifle through my Rolodex. Who do I think might be the right voice? Who might have something interesting and eloquent and evocative to say? That's where many of you can come in, because sometimes one of you would reach out to me first before I ever got to my Rolodex, saying something like, hey, I saw the news that this or that thing had happened, and I have some thoughts on a great opinion piece if you haven't already commissioned something. Music to my ears. I was always on the lookout for a smart take that came unsolicited. Bonus points if the writer could deliver a sharp angle and mellifluous prose in their well-researched piece. One proviso, however, is that I needed the writer to explain to me why they were particularly well-suited to write the piece. But that's just one of many things to keep in mind when reaching out to an editor whom you hope will commission your opinion piece. The qualities and requirements that opinion editors are looking for is the topic that we're going to discuss in depth today. We've assembled a terrific panel of opinion journalists from a range of publications. Corinna Wu is a science journalist and editor based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She currently manages the opinion section for the digital magazine Undark, which explores the intersection of science and society. Jhodie Williams is an editor at Bloomberg Opinion, where she oversees U.S. cultural coverage. Previously, she was an editor at NBC News' opinion vertical Think and at CNN Opinion. Louie Villalobos is a veteran journalist of 25 years, including years as a reporter, before moving to several editing roles. He spent the past 7 years at USA Today, where he started as a politics editor. He's currently the director of opinion for Gannett and runs the USA Today opinion team. Welcome to everybody. So let's start out by having each of you describe your publications and the role that opinion plays at them. Who are your readers? And what's the volume of opinion pieces that you turn over? Can I start with you, Jhodie?
Sure. So, at Bloomberg, our readership and our audience is geared more towards business and markets and the economy and politics and policy. And the Bloomberg opinion team is very large. We have the U.S. team, EMEA, and the APAC team. The U.S. team alone, I would say we push out about 8 columns per day. And so it's a lot of stuff that we're weighing in on daily. And then the other teams are pushing out, 4 to 6 pieces a day as well. So we do have a lot of news that we're rotating through. And the other part of your question, I'm sorry, was what I was looking
Yeah,
at particularly?
yeah, specifically, who is it geared for? What's the turnover? What's the volume? Just kind of a general picture of the landscape at Bloomberg.
Okay. I think I just hit all the boxes there. Yeah.
That sounds great. How about you, Louie?
Hey, we do. I want the team to sit around 5 a day, planned to leave room for some breaking stuff that might come as the day goes on, And our audience, because it's USA Today, our audience is pretty general. But where I like about our audience, it can also be very regional. So if we have something really interesting happening in Florida or California or in the Northeast, it doesn't really matter that it's kind of local or regionally local. It could still be really interesting to our audience. Our audience they're kind of all over the place. There is a big thirst for politics for us. But when we talk about contributors, a lot of that stuff is outside of politics, and a lot of stuff is regionally interesting that our audience can find some connection to.
Okay. Now, just going back, Jhodie, I understand the follow-up question that you wanted to answer. Where does opinion fit in the whole landscape of Bloomberg content? Is it, a relatively small niche kind of section, or how does that work? And the same.
No. Sorry, it's a huge part of the news operation here. And we weigh in on so many things. And I think a lot of our readers look to opinion to sort of explain how they should be thinking about things happening, in the markets and the politics and policy, health stuff. So we're really a big part of the news landscape here at Bloomberg. And I think specifically when you talk about my area of color of coverage, I'm building something new here. It's in terms of focusing on culture, and so that lends itself to really look at, a wider audience because I'm not just focused on the money and markets and all of those things that are typically viewed as Bloombergy topics. And so we've really been able to expand our readership that way. So it's really an important part of the collective news coverage here.
That's great. Louie, how about at USA Today? Where does opinion fit in the bigger landscape?
We pretty much run in tandem with the news side, or sports side or entertainment, because the one cool thing about opinion is we go all over the place. It's not just news, but we run in tandem with them. And so what we try to do is plug into the conversations that are happening around the world, or around the country, or around the topic area, while news is kind of reflecting what's happening. We're trying to like just create some conversation, and we try to stay along with their coverage to kind of just be an additive experience for our readers. And we've found some success doing it, generally speaking.
Interesting. Okay, Corinna, how about you? Can you talk about Undark and where opinion fits there?
Sure. Yes, Undark is a nonprofit publication. It's funded by the Knight Science Journalism Program. And overall, we focus on publishing long-form features, op-eds, and book reviews. We're sort of the opposite, that we're a pretty small operation. Undark publishes exactly one story per day, Monday through Friday. And one of those pieces per week is an op-ed, and that's the section that I run. So, we cover topics anywhere on the intersection of science and society. So oftentimes that means public health, conservation, climate change, scientific ethics, scientific communication, biomedicine. areas like that and technology. So we welcome pitches for op-eds. A lot of them are actually pitched to us by subject matter experts, but we do like to run reported op-eds, which are written by journalists and other writers. And because of Undark's focus kind of on long form features, the op-eds are seen kind of as the sort of quicker turnaround pieces where we can potentially run a piece about something that's more timely.
What's the length of a typical op-ed at Undark?
Generally, we try to have our op-eds be between about 800 and 1,200 words, but I do really appreciate pieces that kind of come in on the shorter end of that range.
Mm-hmm. Louie, how about at USA Today?
It depends. I have a different metric for contributors. For my staff, I don't want them to go past 800 unless they're interviewing somebody, because interviews tend to add depth and length to stuff, and that makes some sense. For contributors, we tend to give them a little bit more room, especially if it's like a first-person experience or something like that. So somewhere right around 1,000, 1,100 I think, is a pretty good gauge for that. Depending on the topic, though, sometimes we'll ask them to go a little shorter.
Jhodie, same question.
We like things to come in between 800 and 900 words. That's the sweet spot. I mean, the goal is for a reader to read from, start to finish. And in order to ensure that, we like it to come in on the shorter side.
Mm-hmm. Seems like everybody's going shorter these days, which maybe reflects readers' shorter interest or attention spans. Now, I described for you in my remarks my daily scramble as an opinion editor. Is that how it plays out at your sites? Talk to me about how you get from the kernel of an idea to actually to an opinion on the page, or the metaphorical page, how your team divides and conquers, how big the team is, what the division of labor is. Jhodie, you said that you focus on culture and cultural stories. Can you also define culture in a Bloomberg at the Bloomberg site?
Culture is broadly defined, but the pieces that I'm looking for have to intersect with business, money, politics and policy, or some sort of social issue in some way, because it still has to fit the Bloomberg brand. Like, why is this thing being published in Bloomberg? And those are the type of things that, in my meetings with my managers, I also have to present in the pitch. Why does it make sense for us to pursue this particular story, and get this particular writer to weigh in on it? So in terms of how we go from sort of like a kernel of an idea to a getting on the page, usually these conversations play out on Slack. And folks will just say, hey, this really interesting thing is happening, or there's an anniversary coming up, or an album drop, or award show, or something that speaks to the culture coverage that I'm trying to build here. And then there's a question of, okay, but what do we want to say about it? And if we don't have an idea of what to say, who can we go to just pose a question like, hey, is there something interesting here that you think that the public needs to know that would help foster a conversation, or move the conversation forward than what's already out there? And so it's all a part of like just throwing stuff out there and seeing what sticks. And it's a huge brainstorming operation here, along with myself and other people on the team. I will say that we have a large group of columnists who cover a wide range of things, so they're on staff, and so the trick for me is to figure out how to weigh in on something that doesn't necessarily overlap with their coverage, and how to make it stand out culturally.
Do the columnists also do culture stories, or are they sort of responding more
every once in a while? And I think that's what's been interesting in me coming here and building the culture coverage, is that folks start to realize like, oh, this cultural thing kind of folds into my beat. I'll give you an example. We have a tech columnist, And when Quincy Jones passed away, he pitched me, he doesn't do culture, he doesn't do his culture coverage, he does tech, and he pitched me about this idea of, you can't really replicate this sort of Quincy Jones's genius with AI, right? And he went into a whole argument that still fell in line with his area of coverage, tech and AI, but that had a cultural spin on it because we were talking about this huge celebrity figure in the music world. So every once in a while, we do have columnists who will pitch me a culture piece that's still tied to their beat. But most of the time, I'm looking outside for outside contributors and looking for freelancers who really, have the authority to weigh in on certain topics.
How about you, Louie? News event happens or something is percolating in the background. How do you get from, I think we need to write something on that to actually seeing the published piece?
It's a winding journey. So we have 6 columnists. I was counting in my head there. I think we have 6 columnists, 2 or 3 editors, voices and commentary, and then we have like a kind of like a GA editor. And so my columnists generally handle, the kind of quick react news stuff. That's never going to be a problem for us. We will always have something fairly quick on what's happening in the news. Where we have a need and a whole, and this is where like we'll brainstorm on is like where how do we get a voice topic expert on a topic on an issue that adds a layer of depth to our coverage. And we get that a lot from contributors, almost exclusively from contributors. When you talk about like depth and something that our staff cannot provide because they don't live in the region, they're not experiencing this firsthand. They don't know, they don't have the years of experience and research experience, right? So we have a good mix of contributors that we go out and find and come to us oftentimes. Any major news event that has happened in the past, I don't know, 5 months, and there's been a lot. My writers will pretty quickly respond in some way to get us on the board. And then we immediately go look for outside voices and contributors that can add some depth to it. And oftentimes it's just who do we think we need to get, and then we just go and start going through the process, And we have it pretty well streamlined now, but it can be a scramble with stuff that we just never saw coming, stuff we didn't know was going on, and okay, we got to go find somebody now. Then the challenge becomes not to overdo it. We'll send out 5 solicitations, and if all 5 come back, yes, then we got to pick. But that's a good problem to have. But that we use outside voices to add depth to our existing coverage because our existing coverage will almost always be very quick, very in the moment, with some second, third day coverage. But we need outside voices for that, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. So, how big is your opinion team?
We have 6 columnists, a voices editor, a commentary editor, a fact checker. We fact check everything. Everything we publish gets fact checked. We have a audience person who she's an audience expert and an audience director for audience for Gannett for Opinion Gannett. She does all of our SEO stuff. And then we have Twan, the great Twan, who is a lifelong copy editor, and she copy edits everything that we post. So everything we post goes to like 5 sets of eyes, basically. And then we have one other person who is like another editor that helps our voices editor. So it's a pretty robust team. It's grown over the years. It's shrunk over the years. It's just kind of ebbs and flows. But right now we're pretty well staffed.
And Jhodie, can you remind me of the number of people who are working on opinion at Bloomberg?
On the US side, we have about, oh gosh, maybe about 8 columnists. We have a publishing team, publishing audience team. We have about 6 editors. And the process here is that the editors are responsible for fact checking the pieces. And so we then really stress to the writers that their pieces need to come in pretty buttoned up factually. And that goes without saying for the staff folks and the columnists, but I really tried to stress that with the outside contributors. So we do have a really big team. I'm not sure, and I don't want to say the wrong number about how many are on the APAC team and the EMEA team, but On the US side, those are the number of columnists and editors that we have, along with the publishing team and the social team, uh, which is about 5 people on that side of stuff, doing video, social promotion, figuring out what should be published when, SEO guidance, headlining, and all of that.
And Corinna, you're a one-woman band. Did I understand that correctly?
Pretty much. I edit all the opinion pieces, and we have one of my colleagues is dedicated to doing the fact checking for those pieces. But then after it goes through me and my colleague, it gets copy edited, read by a top editor, and yeah, usually posted by another person. Rather than focusing on the news cycle, at Undark, our pieces are often more evergreen, looking at trends, all of them with science at their core. And pieces that often work well for us are ones that we can kind of plan ahead, actually several weeks or even a couple months ahead. So if there are anniversaries or things that are coming up, it's great to get pitches that are kind of pegged to those so that we can plan ahead for them.
Now, I saw one piece that you forwarded me the link to from a woman who had contracted malaria and sort of talking about the bigger landscape of, just basically how we're falling behind in where we used to be in terms of controlling for this illness. Would that be a piece that I'm just wondering about the genesis of a piece like that? I'm not a science writer, let's say. I'm assuming this person wasn't, based upon what I could see in her bio. Is she just someone who reached out and said, hey, I had this experience and I wanted to talk about more broadly where malaria treatment is going, given my experience? Or how does, particularly a first person piece, which I think was maybe your sweet spot for some of your op-eds, how does that go from, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but how does it go from, hey, I have a thought, to the piece as published on Undark?
Yeah, I mean, that piece actually started because I met the writer at a conference, and she does cover, environment and, has a bit of that background. And so she had been researching a book on malaria and told me this story about her personal experience with it. And we just kind of, started talking about like, well, where could we take an op-ed, that was about that. And of course, with everything that's happened with the current administration and funding for science and, the decimation of a lot of the federal agencies, it's not hard to find an angle to cover. In fact, a lot of our pitches that we've received this year, have an angle like that about, the science funding and the firing of federal employees working at agencies. So yeah, I just kind of grew out of that. And there's, a lot of different, angles to talking about malaria in terms of how climate change is affecting how mosquitoes move around the world, new treatments for malaria that are out there, but are they enough? And another, one aspect that really kind of, I think, sold this op-ed to me is that at the same time that she was in the hospital for malaria after having traveled and contracted it from abroad, there were dozens of so-called homegrown cases of malaria in the US, meaning that they couldn't trace them to people who had traveled, meaning that they had somehow either contracted from mosquitoes in the country. So that added sort of an added layer of sort of, timeliness for us for that piece.
Gotcha. So for somebody who isn't a science specialist, but is affected by science because they live in the world, what's the approach? So can they just reach out to you and say, hey, I'm a writer, not necessarily a science writer, but I've been noticed, whatever, and whatever the phenomenon, I should have thought of something. How do they go about doing a piece for Undark?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it very much, depends on the pitch itself. And I guess I need to, one of the things that I always tell people is that we look for, original evidence-based opinions on topics at the intersection of science and society. So where science intersects with politics, economics, and culture. And so I need to know that the writer, is comfortable with sort of using evidence to support their opinion. So even if you're not a science writer, I think it's important to just be able to, report the science that's at the core piece, and to understand, how, science can be used to support whatever position or point of view that you're expressing.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a general inbox at Undark, or how do you mostly get your pitches?
Yeah, we have a pitch form online on our website. That's probably the best place to submit pitches, because what happens is that the pitch kind of gets tracked and it's put in a place where all of the editors can view it. And you'll see on the submissions page, it actually says that, we have our weekly story meetings on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And so generally, if you get your pitch in before that, we'll be able to consider it and get back to you on it.
How about at USA Today, Louie? How does one submit a query cold to the publication?
Yeah, we have an online form as well, and it goes to an inbox. The inbox is notoriously, I won't say full, but packed. And so we do have editors that cycle through and weed out, respond, and kick it to the next phase if it's one we're going to use, if it's something we're looking for. A lot of times we will keep people in mind as well. If it's not something we want to use now, we'll keep them in mind for later. If we know they've lived a particular experience or have a particular expertise on something, it may be something that's not really timely, but we'll save them. We'll create a little online Rolodex. Okay, we're going to use this person for later, and then reach back out to them. But there is like a feeding system to an inbox that we'll just kind of go through and see what we want to use.
All right, but it sounds like if your inbox is often full.
It's often full or packed, and not like full where you can't get any more submissions. It's just like we'll let them sit there if we're not going to use them, and we'll star them or something, and then we'll try to clean house after a while. So it may get caught on the cycle where it's just a lot of stuff we're going through, but it's never full that it'll like kick back submissions.
Right, but I guess I'm wondering if I have a timely query, is that where I want to send my query, or do I want to track down?
Track down somebody. I mean, it just always in life, if you have something you need to get to a group of people, track down the people involved. I mean, that's just the easiest thing to do it. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get a response, but you're more likely to get a response. Okay. If you could find the editors, find my editors, and find us, and then our emails are pretty easy to find. We get individual pitches all the time. Our editors do all the time, and it will spark a conversation. Like, is this something we need? And again, if for no other reason that if you interact with the editor, they may put you on like a little list for later. And we get a lot of stuff like that we'll turn down initially, but then we remember a writer submitted something or an expert submitted something. We'll wait for it to be maybe a little more timely, and then go back to that person like, hey, we want that now. Or if the pitch, we don't like the pitch, but we like the topic, we may say we'll grab something else. I did that recently, actually. And can we just do another column on the same topic? So yeah, I would always advise you reach out to an editor directly if you can.
And I suppose also in this slush pile or whatever we'd want to call it, a writer would only get a response if you've accepted the piece. Yeah,
generally speaking, which isn't great. Nobody likes to be ghosted, and nobody likes to send submissions, but we get so many submissions. But yeah, we generally will only respond if it's something we want, or if it's something we think we want to deal with later, or we like the writer's point of view or the writer's experience, and we want to, in some way, if we want to keep the conversation going, we will respond.
And when they're submitting to you, are they giving you full-length pieces? Are they giving you just an idea? And what do you prefer?
It varies, and the answer from editors what they prefer, I've learned, also varies. I think at the very least, most of them at least just give us the idea. You will see some that have the full-length column. And if we don't like the idea, we will never open the full-length column. If we like the idea, we'll open the full-length column to see. I generally don't have a preference. I don't have a preference, but I also don't have something that I just don't like. Like, I don't have any pet peeves. If people send an idea that they're trying to flesh out, I wouldn't expect them to have a full column. If they have a full column, I'm fine with them sending it. I'll skim it. Like I said, if I like the idea and if I like what they're talking about, I'll skim the column. Sometimes I'll send feedback on the column I'm not going to use, but I'm happy to work with somebody on a column. But again, every editor is different. I've seen editors say, I don't want any full columns. I just want the idea. But at the very least, send a well thought out pitch that kind of has an idea of where you're going to go with it, at the very least, and then you can just go from there.
So, I mean, if you're a freelancer and you're looking for sort of best practices, or I want to maximize my chance of USA Today taking my writing, would you recommend that they send you the full length column, or do you think the shorter is smarter?
I think if there's no reason why you can't do both. If I see in a comment somebody says they can't access the USA Day pitch from the AEU, I see the comment and I will see if I can get that fixed for you. Thank you. I do think if you have a full column and a well thought out pitch, send both. What you don't want to do is paste a column into the body of the email, because that just like gives me a long email that I'm just like literally never going to read. If you have a really good pitch and an attached column, that at least gives the editor, at least gives me the option of doing both without overwhelming me with words. But yeah, if you have a fully written column, but then also I will say this: if you send a fully written column, make sure it's good and make sure it's what you want to say, and what and clarity in the writing, and this is what I want to get. Like, put your best foot forward with your draft, because it's a bit of a gamble. You can send a pitch. We like the pitch. We like the idea. We open the column, be like, oh no, this will not do, right? So and there's been times where we'll work with them. I will, if I like it, I'll work with the people. I mean, okay, what if we do this? But if you send a draft, attach it and make sure it's a very good draft. Don't send like a first draft where you go back and read it and tweak, and make sure it's something you're proud of. Make sure it's something you would want to see posted as is, and that's kind of your best chance. I've seen good pitches get ruined by bad draft, but I've seen the other way around. I've seen bad pitches get saved by a good draft.
Interesting.
It's a very weird abstract thing.
It's more art than science.
Yeah, it really is. It is. Yeah.
Jhodie, how about at Bloomberg? I ask a lot of questions there in succession, but sending to the submission pile and draft versus pitch, et cetera, et cetera.
So we do have an inbox that takes sort of general pitches. I always say, like Louie said, please your best bet is to try to find an editor that you can reach out to directly. Especially for the culture pieces, please reach out to me directly. You're more likely to get a response. I like full drafts, because when I see a full draft, I know what I'm getting myself into. So often I've been bamboozled by a really good, pitch, and it sounds really great. And then, I commission it and we go through that whole process, and the draft lands and I'm just like, whoa, how did we get here? Right. And I think if you are not, my main advice to folks who are just going into the opinion space is, if you don't have like a lot of clips that you can attach to an email, I think your best bet, for me personally, is to attach a draft. Like Louie said, make sure it's good though, because that's sort of like that's your presentation of how you're thinking about your piece, sort of your writing style, how clear you're thinking about the piece. And I'm gonna judge based off of that. If you are someone who writes frequently, opinion columns, op-eds, then I don't necessarily need to see a draft. Though that can also get dicey, because you're sending clips and I'm only seeing the finished product of those clips, right? That's gone through the editing process and all of that. So I really don't know what the first draft looked like when it got to that that editor. But I'm more inclined to let that slide, because then I know that that writer understands the editing process and is familiar with the back and forth and all that needs to be done. But definitely, if you're not used to writing opinion pieces and you don't have a lot of clips to send, I would prefer to see a full draft.
I see. Okay. Do you also want them to send copies of things that they've written elsewhere, clips or?
So sorry if I wasn't clear. I think if you don't have clips, then sending a draft is preferred, because then I can get an understanding and a feel of, okay, do you even understand how an opinion piece is supposed to be laid out? So that helps me sort of figure out, is this worth taking? I think if you do have clips, it's fine not to send a full draft, because I kind of get the impression that you know how opinion writing should go and that you've been through the editing process elsewhere. So I think it's easier for me to make a judgment if you have clips but don't have a draft sent.
Gotcha.
Draft that you have ready to be sent.
Okay, got that. Anybody else want to weigh in on this particular topic, or we can move on to something else? I want to give everybody a chance to pipe up if there's something else to say on it. Everybody good? Well, so related, Louie says, make sure that when you send it, it's something good. So tell me what makes, it's a very broad topic, I guess, and very general, but what makes a good opinion piece? Louie?
I knew you were going to ask that. I knew as soon as I said it. That's the question coming. I think it is a very abstract idea, but there are some core concepts that you can cling to. Like, is this a good piece? And because I do this with my writers, if the opinion is clear, you're on your way, right? If an opinion is absolutely clear, you're absolutely on your way. If the opinion is well funded, well found, if the foundation of the opinion is good and it's based on something, a lived experience that you can prove, factually based, that's already you're there. Like and this is a stupid thing to say, and I understand that, but a lot of opinion writers, the biggest problem they have is crystallizing their opinion and saying, this is what I think. And it's harder to do when you're doing it through a lived experience. It's hard. It's honestly harder to do. Sometimes contributors have a harder task of opinionating than like a staff writer who is just pontificating on something that happened nowhere near their circle, right? So the writing of it then becomes where we get into some room for good or bad. But if your opinion is clear and direct and obvious, if I see the headline in like the first 5 graphs, you're off to a good start. From there, then you just talk about like the writing of it, the flow, the narrative flow of it. So one of the things I tell people to do is read your column out loud. If you read your column out loud and you don't stop or stutter or think, wait, that doesn't make any sense, then that's another pretty good indication. But for me, a good column is just one that is clearly opinionated and clearly thought out and crystallized. You can always tell when somebody isn't sure of their opinion in the writing because they're clearing their throat a lot. They're adding a lot of like context that there's like they're walking up to an opinion that they're trying to figure out in the writing. If your opinion is clear, concise, well thought out, well researched, the rest will take care of itself. Then we'll just know if you're a good writer or not, right? But just give me something that I know you believe, and I know you believe in your soul. This is what I think needs to happen, and I can help you with the rest. I can't help you if you don't know what your opinion is.
Yeah, I can imagine that you can help clean up writing that needs some polishing. But
yeah, you can walk in with transitions and walk in with the narrative flow of a column of a writing piece, which is sometimes where the details and the quality of the column comes in is when the way you present your opinion. But that I can help you with, and I mean I can help you figure out your opinion too. But you need to know at least what you're trying to say. Like, what are you trying to say? And then we can get you the rest if I like the opinion on that stuff. But yeah, I mean, and professional opinion writers have this challenge of figuring out what I'm trying to say in this topic when it's a pop-up opinion. We're like, hey, we need something like now. What do you think? Oh my God, I don't know what I think. Let me think about what I think. And then, okay, this is what I think. Well, I'm not sure that's what you think. Let's think about what you think you think. So like you get into this like circle of conversation about what your actual opinion is, and you kind of boil it down to this. Okay, now write everything to that. And again, professional opinion writers have that challenge. So don't feel bad. It's good. It's good for you to chew on your opinion and to ponder and to consider. And then but once you go to submit it, make sure all that is crystallized.
Corinna, how about for you? What makes a good opinion piece for Undark?
I would say an argument that's original. We kind of, as I mentioned before, we're not going to compete on the news cycle. So by the time an Undark op-ed comes out, there probably will have been, if it's something significant that happened, there probably will be other pieces that have already appeared. So I'm really looking for a take that is something that other people have not written about before. So we tend to gravitate to things that are kind of unexpected, maybe a little counterintuitive or contrarian even. If you look at Undark coverage, you'll see that. We're not afraid of also tackling pretty controversial topics either. So that is something that I think maybe makes a pitch stand out to me, is if it's original. And as Louie said, the clarity of the argument is really important as well. And I'll also need to know that they can work with us to develop that. Yeah.
Jhodie?
I think the pitch needs to have a very clear news peg to work for us. And I think, like the other panelists said, the opinion needs to be very clear, and people struggle with that. It's just a common thing, and so I think being able to really think through what this headline is going to be. And I usually tell writers that, okay, you have this pitch. What do you see as the headline here? I really throw it back on them because it allows them to really think, okay, do I have an argument here? you know? And if you're struggling to think of the headline, I usually say the headline and the deck. And if you're struggling to think of those two things, then it's a good indicator that maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and sort of think through a little bit more what your opinion is.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't get right away to the issue of money, which is what, if you're a freelancer, what it's all about in some ways. There are three issues that freelancers really care a lot about when it comes to freelance contracts, when it comes to getting a piece commissioned. What are the copyright license terms? Or when is this a sort of work for hire arrangement? Does the freelancer retain rights kind of to the piece in perpetuity after a certain length of time? And what's the situation in terms of indemnification from lawsuits, which, in these litigious times, I guess is more of an issue than it might have been in the past. So can you talk about what your terms are if they've been homed in on those three issues? Can we start with Corinna?
Yeah, so Undark pays a flat $700 fee for op-eds, and as I mentioned before, generally between 800 and 1,200 words, but generally we like to run pieces between like 800 to 1,000 words. In terms of contracts and fees, Undark asks for a first rights publication and an exclusive license to publish for the first 90 days. And during that 90-day period, we allow other outlets to freely republish. So, during the time I've been at Undark, we've had places like Slate and Salon and Scientific American, Ars Technica, basically republish the piece. So you can get, it's a way to get a lot more eyes on the piece. After the first 90 days, then the exclusive license expires. So then anybody who wants to republish your piece after that will have to come to the writer to negotiate the rights. And so, you're free to, do that as you wish.
Interesting.
And there's no indemnification clause in the contract either.
Okay. Does that mean that the writer should get insurance for that kind of thing, or I don't know? I'm just wondering if there's
there's no indemnification clause. So what that means, I guess, is, if someone, right, if someone tries to bring suit against Undark or something, we're not going to turn around and put all the responsibility on the writer, right? Yeah. That's what I mean. There is a clause in there that's I don't know the legal terminology, but I think it's like kind of like a hold harmless clause where, like, if someone say brings suit against the writer, Undark says that we may help out, but we don't have to. And then the reverse is true. If we ask that they hold us, the writer holds Undark harmless for things. So, but there's no indemnification that
I see. Okay.
The onerous clause. Yeah.
Gotcha. How about you, Jhodie?
So the business side handles all of this between the writer and the senior executive editor for the team. But what I will say is that the contracts are negotiated case on a case-by-case basis, and Bloomberg retains publishing and reprinting rights, though the specifics can be negotiated on the back end. It's $750 for a flat fee, and between 800 to 900 words, as I mentioned earlier. After a piece is published, the writer sends an invoice, and we're on a net 30 schedule, I believe.
Okay. And as far as the legal piece, the laws or whatever, that's to be discussed. That's another unit in Bloomberg that.
Yes, it is. It is.
What about for you, Louie?
We also don't have an indemnification clause, but what we do have is a really strict fact-checking process and a team of lawyers that we send stuff to ahead of time. We will, quote, lawyer contributor pieces to make sure everybody's good. So we have a really big, deep process for fact-checking stuff that goes just beyond me and the writer. And then, like I said, if we have any issues and we think, hey, we should probably run this by lawyers, we will. We'll check with our corporate lawyers or whatever to see if there's any issues.
So does everybody have a standards editor and a legal review as well as part of their process, or is that also case by case?
For me, no. What we do for contributors, mostly for contributors, what we have is a staff fact checker that she goes through everything, and the contributors will send sources and stuff. So we double check the sources, ask for any new sources that we think we need, the whole process of fact checking, and then double check that. And then I myself personally will then go back and backstop all of them and look for any tweaks that this doesn't quite add up, and then we'll go there. So every piece of contributor column that we bring in goes through the fact checker. Then on top of that, we have a copy editor. That is a whole different vibe. If anybody's that work with copy editors see words and the world completely different from regular people. And I love them for it. Like, I love copy editors. They're great. So they go and read, she reads through all of that and make sure, okay, we're good. And then she also sometimes will have more notes and more questions. And she does that with everything, not just contributors, with everything. And then we have an audience person who also goes back and reads for SEO. And then she oftentimes, because she has the mind of a copy editor, will go and read through again. And she may also have another notes. And then on the front end, if we like the draft, but we're not sure of like legal issues, and maybe after the fact checker has her say, we may oftentimes then go to the lawyers and like, hey, take a look at this. And we've done that recently. And what do you think of this? And then they'll get feedback from them, right? And that we do with everything as well. News site, everybody does that. And it's a pretty common thing. So we just have a pretty like a gauntlet of things that we send, especially contributor columns through, to make sure everybody involved is good. And then we converse with the writer the whole way through to make sure they're okay with any tweaks and changes we're making.
Gotcha. Well, thank you all for all of that. So I'm going to go to Q&A with some questions submitted by people attending the webinar. I have one question from Priyanka, who asks specifically to Jhodie Ann and Louie, are you open to international op-eds? And if yes, what should I keep in mind in terms of what you want and don't want?
Because I oversee the US side, I'm not looking for international op-eds. That would go to the if you're pitching that, and I can give you all the inbox that should go to, that would go there, and one of our international editors would take a look at it. But I'm not specifically looking for international pieces.
Okay.
We are generally, I saw in the question, I did not mention pay, I just forgot. It's $400, I believe, is what we landed on, $400, though there's room for negotiation, I think, according to my boss. We do look for international columns, but it's a really tough sell for an American audience. And I can go into as much detail as you want on that, but we are generally looking for international audience. I will tell you that your best bet is to have it tied to a news event, to a news happening, to something. The news part of it doesn't have to be, it's a U.S. news thing. It could be something in your region. It's fine. And then the opinion itself or has to be incredibly compelling and something, worth putting before an American audience that is very picky with international news. You would be surprised at the passive interest sometimes with international news. But we often will grab it because we still need depth in our coverage. So we're always looking for international news. We're just kind of pickier with it.
Gotcha. Well, someone named Lena Bazalyeva asks about Eastern European politics, opinion pieces that she might share from there. It sounds like, that that you said that that's a tough sell because you publish so few of those pieces, or because the opinion team on the international side is super picky, or just that the American reader doesn't care about foreign news all that much, or all of the above?
Yeah. So for me, almost when anybody hears me say something is a tough sell, I'm always talking about the audience. I generally am not interested in what my opinion editors think is good or not. That the audience will tell us. The audience will tell us what is good or not, and we'll have a conversation sometimes about that, right? And there's wiggle room. But so when I say that the international audience columns are tough sell, it's because they're tough sell for our audience. You can do them though, and if the news is happening, we will sometimes turn a blind eye to what we know because it's news and it's important, and we want to add some depth to our coverage, right? The best way to sell something, and this I think might be true for a lot of U.S. properties, is to sell it through the lens of like I'll tell my editors, for instance, if you're going to grab something that's happening anywhere in the world, doesn't matter the region, is there an American lens to filter it through? Is American policy impacting it? And if there's not, that's okay too, but that's like the first thing. If you're a writer pitching something that's happening in, say, Europe, it's a tougher sell, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't pitch it. It's just going to be a tougher sell. It has to be something that's compelling. If you allow me, I'll give you an example. It's when I was on the news side, I came up with this like calculus for when we pick up something that's not happening locally when I was in Phoenix, Arizona. So what we came up with is the idea of if there's a car accident outside your house, it's incredibly interesting. The whole neighborhood's looking. Nobody outside of your neighborhood cares about that car accident. If there's a car accident involving a baby, okay, now citywide now maybe is interested, but nobody outside of your city cares. If it's a car accident involving a baby who maybe passed, or a mother or a father who did something, so as the mitigating factors are added to the news event, the interest of it expands. And so when you're pitching something that's outside of the United States, it's going to need a few different points of interest beyond this is important to my block. And then you got a chance. Or incredibly interesting, wildly interesting as a lived experience or something like that. And then we'll take a look at it for sure.
Okay. For the entire panel, question, what about people following up? I know when I was writing freelance, I'm terrible about nudging my editor. How's it going? What's it looking? Any update? How do you feel about hearing getting that kind of nudging? Corinna?
Oh, are you talking about a pitch that you sent in?
Well, either a pitch or an edited piece. I mean, would you rather I have your stuff, I'm working on it, I'm only one person? I mean, how do you respond to that kind of nudging?
I'm fine with it. I mean, for us, as I mentioned, sometimes we are scheduling things quite far ahead, and I try to keep the writer apprised of the schedule and give them a sense of like when the bulk of the editing and fact checking is going to happen, and making sure it matches with their schedule, because we want to be flexible for that too. But I always encourage writers that we're working with to contact me at any stage. If they need.
And for a pitch that hasn't been accepted yet, do you mind them nudging you about an answer?
Oh, I don't mind that at all. And usually if people pitch through our submission form, as I said, our pitches, they get reviewed on Wednesdays. And usually by the end of that day or the next day, you'll get a response, yes or no. So that's one reason I encourage people to pitch to the form, is for that reason. If you haven't heard about a pitch, in a timely manner, and it's time sensitive, you want to pitch it elsewhere, I would encourage them to reach out directly to me.
How about you, Jhodie? Do you feel like you don't really want to hear back from people? You don't call me, I'll call you kind of thing? Or
No. I don't feel that way at all. I get so many pitches and other emails in my inbox that I always encourage writers to feel free to nudge me, because it's not on purpose that I haven't responded. There's some times when I open the pitch and I'm reading it, and then something else happens and I'm like, I'll get back to it, then I never get back to it. So and it's not done on purpose, it's just the nature of how the day is going and how the news is going. So I always encourage people to follow up within a day or two. I wanted, if I may answer your question about communicating with the writer in terms of edits, I always keep communication open. And I always say, look, I'll get to it later on today, or I'm going to aim to get to it later on this afternoon. What's your availability to work on edit? So that communication is always open, and so that there are no surprises, and that everybody understands everybody's schedule and sort of bandwidth to work on a piece. So I don't mind, it's a part of building those relationships with writers. And if I want to go back to them and I want them to come back to me, that's a part of just respecting their time and them respecting my time as well.
So ideally, you wouldn't want them nudging you until what, a week's gone by, 3 days? What's
Are you
the
in terms of edits?
And let's say in terms of a pitch, like I sent you the pitch and it's kind of timely and I want to pitch elsewhere maybe if you don't take it. So can you let me, I mean,
You
what?
can do that in a couple of days. Like if it's time sensitive, just nudge me and I'll send you a quick email saying, yeah, we're not gonna to take it, and good luck pitching it elsewhere.
Okay.
I also appreciate if folks are pitching it elsewhere, the simultaneous pitch, I want them to be able to communicate that with me in the initial pitch, just so that I'm aware. I don't have a problem with it, but it's just nice to just know that other publications are looking at it too.
Gotcha. Louie, do you have any thoughts on, I mean, I guess it sounds like you are very responsive because you're editing even pieces that you haven't taken, you said, but
Yeah, I mean, my main character flaw is I'm horrible with email. As this group can attest, I've missed emails sent from this very group, and I apologize for that. I am horrible with email. One thing I will tell you is if you put my name in the subject line, you have a better chance of reading. I don't tell it. I think I've told like 10 people that, and I have proof that people will put my name in the subject line to see the pitch. So I'm horrible with email. So as a result, send whenever you think you need to for me. We've all been there. Shouldn't I just do it? Just do it.
So in the subject line of something sent to your email address, or in the subject line?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. I know. I know it's dumb, but people have started doing it, and it gets my attention because while we've been here, I've literally counted. I have 10 pitches from just random people. And then I have 20 things pinned of running conversations. And so I'll pin them. Like once you're in my circle, I will pin it so I see the responses. And so that's a lot of stuff, and we all do that. That's not new to me. We all get a lot of pitches, and it's really hard to get to all of them. And so sometimes I am horrible at not always responding to pitches that I know I don't want. And I've come to learn that it's helpful to say no so that people can move on. And that's a thing I'm trying to be better at. But if you put my name in the subject, then I'm like a really bad person if I ignore it. And I don't want to be a really bad person. So put my name in the subject. If you're pitching me directly, if just me, don't put it to my editors. They're just going to laugh. But
what else should they put in the subject line? They want you to read.
I think the hardest thing about a pitch is just getting something that we're going to open, right? So I would consider pitches to be a lot like newsletters. We all subscribe to newsletters that we don't read. Like, let's just be real. We subscribe to newsletters that we don't read. We have podcasts signed up that we don't listen to. So when newsletters, the hardest thing for a newsletter is to get somebody to open it. The most important thing to get somebody to open it is the subject. So don't give me like an abstract thing on something. I can't tell you honestly what a good subject is in an email, because we all also see there's truncated. They don't give us everything. Like we send an email and the subject isn't always going to be there. Like I have my panel's really short. I don't see the whole thing. I don't know, man. It's a tough thing to talk about because it honestly will be a lot of your pitches are just going to get missed. And so send them again. Try different subject lines. Netflix does this really well. Netflix will have the cover art of their show, and if you'll notice, a month later it'll be a different photo or different cover art for the same show. They're just repitching their shows to you, but they're changing up the photo to get you to look again. You can do that in your subject line. Repitch it again with another different subject line. Say, hey, reaching back out in the subject line, checking in again. You can use like these guilt-causing terms for editors. Checking back in, they'll be like, oh man, okay, so you go, and so you can do stuff like that, and you'll be surprised how often that works. Sometimes you just pitch to our human side, and nobody wants to ignore people. It's a horrible thing to be ignored. It's a horrible thing to ignore. but we're in the cycle of news. Sometimes it happens. So yeah, call us out in the subject line. Just check it back in.
That's really interesting because I think that writers would think I don't want to make a nuisance of myself.
No, and that's a valid thing to believe, but also you just have to shoot your shot. Like, if what's the worst that's going to happen? An editor who's already ignored you and in their mind past is just going to do it again, and if you can't hurt yourself, basically.
Gotcha. Okay, for Jhodie and for you, Louie, is there a good day of the week to pitch?
What I would say about this is the worst day to pitch me is on a Friday. Everybody is trying to get to the finish line with different things, and I'm just not paying this close attention on a Friday. The best time to pitch me, I would say, is the start of the week, Monday, fresh, and really make clear what the news peg is. I guess, is there something coming up that I should be paying attention to this week? So Fridays are absolutely, you can try. You can try, but I think you're more likely to get a response from me at the start of the week, because that's when also we're sort of planning the week, what's coming up. I'm searching for story ideas, and so if I get some really good ones on Monday, that makes my job a lot easier.
Do you plan things out weeks in advance? Do you do many anniversary stories? Do you, how does your calendar planning go?
I think we don't do that many anniversary stories, but I will do things sort of pegged to specific events, like award shows, right? Or nominations are coming out. And so I think a nice lead time to that would probably be like a week in advance to get me a pitch. And that way we can sort of prepare it and I can kind of understand, what this piece is going to be about and how it's going to, pitch it to the team, and if we think that if it makes sense to put it out and will be a strong contender to what's already out there around an award show or event. So I would say like a week or 2 weeks out is good to send me something.
How about you, Louie, in terms of day of the week and in terms of advanced planning?
No, Fridays are absolutely horrible. They're the worst. Like, Jhodie's not wrong. Right now, while we're doing this, my editors, I'm seeing the chat. We're going back and forth on like what we're having between now and Monday. So 3 to 5 columns a day. So you're about almost 15 columns that we're having to like finish up the editing, move around the budgeting, fact checking, SEO, all that stuff. Right? We're doing all that on Friday, so that my people don't have to log on Sunday to do it. And then another 2 columnists message me and they want to write something. I got to tell them to get lost because we already got our weekend sorted. So Fridays are really weird for us because we're budgeting the full weekend. Early in the week is great. There's no specific days like this day's perfect. This early in the week is fine. I would say though, the best bet is if it's newsy, especially like if it's newsy, send it immediately, regardless of the day, because we're actively looking for stuff. If it's newsy, if something just happened and you're a topic expert or you lived through something like that, if you've experienced something like that, the earlier column you brought up from disease, that sounds like an amazing column. And so like if you experience something or you have something to say on a newsy topic, send it immediately, because that's when we're actively looking for emails, generally speaking. But
Gotcha.
Fridays are bad.
Now you'd said that international maybe, but depending, and there are a lot of sort of other elements you need to have in there. What about local? How local can someone be for a USA Today column that might work for a national publication?
It's a good question. We have a really wider net than most national outlets do for local stuff. But it just has to be very interesting. If it's statewide, I'll give you an example. My writer, one of my columnists wrote something out of Florida, specific to Florida. Just if this is happening in Florida, and it did very well because people are like, "What's going on in Florida?" Like, so if it's like really interesting, if it's something that's newsy, interesting in the moment kind of thing that we think audiences somewhere else, well, at least let me click and see what this is about. The holy grail is this happened to me in particular Oregon, and someone else in like DC is like, hey, that happened to me too. Like that's that kind of thing is what we're always looking for. Something that like somebody lived through something in this very local area that somebody else across the country also experienced and knows something about. Caregiving is a really big one. So anything, it can be local, it can be state, it can be regional. It just has to be very interesting. The more local it is, the more interesting it has to be. And I know interesting is a scale of abstract, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, one man's interesting is another person's turning the page or whatever. Jhodie, same question.
I would have to piggyback off of what Louie said. I think the more local it is, the more interesting it has to be. I think one thing, if it's local, I would say, okay, but why is this important to a national audience? How can we make the connection to a national audience? And I think thinking through that is really helpful when you're pitching. It doesn't mean that you're changing sort of the core of the story. You're just saying, okay, this is important to a wider audience because XYZ. And I think figuring that out is part of the trick. And that can happen if you have a relationship with an editor, that can happen sort of in that, brainstorming session. Like if I like a pitch, but it seems super local, I will often ask, okay, but what does this mean for the rest of the country? And we can sort of have that dialogue to sort of, try to figure it out. I don't expect writers to have everything figured out. I think that's part of the fun and building of relationships that's important.
Gotcha. I've been asked to ask if you can give an example or two, a freelance pitch or story idea that's worked really well for you. We kind of talked a little bit about some of those, but maybe all of you have another idea of something that answers that question. Starting with Corinna.
Let's see. Well, there was one piece, I think, Stephanie, I sent you a link to this. But it was a piece that asked about, are we having a moral panic over misinformation? That was the headline that ran with it. Because there was there was a lot of talk about misinformation and how it's led people to like not get vaccinated and, all these kinds of, responses to public health. And what this writer had done is that she had actually just written a news story about a study that had come out on this topic, looking at how, misinformation changes people's behavior. And she had written for a different publication. But then she said, well, I've been looking into this and it looks like, even researchers don't have a good definition of what misinformation is. And it was actually a little bit counterintuitive in that in these studies, it didn't seem to affect people's behavior. So that for us made a kind of an interesting op-ed. And so, that was a pitch that kind of grabbed our attention because it was, again, a little unexpected, but yet still using the scientific evidence to kind of support a position that was, again, so, hadn't been covered a lot. So yeah, that's just one example.
Louie, do you have a pitch that worked for you particularly well?
It's a bit of a difference, more of a solicitation. When the Trump administration, RFK Jr. announced the Tylenol thing, there was a lot to say about that. Now, my son is autistic. He's 13. He's super cool. He's one of the ones that's been texting me this whole time. But he's autistic. So I can write 20 columns about all of that, right? But because I am not autistic, I generally don't. I am not going to speak for the autistic community. So we went and found somebody who was and say, okay, so it was, marginalized communities, underrepresented communities are oftentimes the hardest left to find in when these news moments. And regardless of what I felt about what the administration said about Tylenol and autism and all that nonsense, I knew I needed somebody who was actually autistic. And so we went and found somebody and said that person wrote, and it's a pretty good column. And it was just like an example of just trying to find somebody to speak to news through their own experience. And so this person, I'm autistic, and here's what I have to say about that. We did go out and find the mom and all that stuff, and that was cool, and all that added value and depth to the coverage. But in the moment, we needed somebody who was actually autistic, who could speak to that, who could speak to the news, who could speak to the announcement and what it means for them. Those kinds of interactions are the ones I really like.
Great. Jhodie, we're running out of time, but if you have any quick thought on
Yes, I'll quickly just mention there's a piece from a freelancer, and it was pegged to Beyonce, the release of her Cowboy Carter album cover. And there was all this sort of discussion happening on social media about why was she holding the American flag, and it's come to represent division. And so there was all this like confusion. And I was like, I really would love to get someone on this. And so I went to a writer who I've never worked with before. I submitted a request on her website, and she's a Black Texan. And she was able to really break down the fact that, it's complicated, but this idea that, Beyonce is holding this American flag really makes sense to Black Texans. She went into the history of Black cowboys and the rodeo and all that cultural elements really brought the piece to life and added a lot of depth to her analysis. So that's quickly one that really stands out to me that I commissioned.
Well, that's terrific. I read that piece from that link that you sent. It was a great piece.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. I can't thank you all enough. This has been so helpful for me, an opinion editor who's done this for a lot of my life, but I've learned a lot, even moderating today. I'm going to pass it back to Catherine. We're not hearing you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you all so much. I can sum up for the audience what people often say, editors are human. And this is the kind of conversation that just makes the process so much easier for freelancers. Thank you all on a busy Friday, which we now know is the worst day for you, for taking the time to be here. Corinna Wu, Jhodie Williams, Louie Villalobos, and Stephanie Griffith. We're so grateful for your time, your expertise, your humanity, your encouragement. I want to also encourage everyone to sign up for the IIJ newsletter. That is how you will find out about future webinars, our upcoming conference, and other opportunities for free and really low cost education on freelancing, the business of freelancing, and connecting with gatekeepers. On Friday, November 14th, we're going to have a panel of amazing audio journalists and project managers talking about how to save time, money, and not burn your clients with very clear project scoping, something that we don't talk that much about, but is so crucial. On Friday, December 12th, we'll have a webinar on building stable revenue with journalism adjacent gigs. So we're going to have someone talking about due diligence for corporate America, corporate communications writing, other types of journalism adjacent work that can subsidize your journalism. We will also talk about how to manage conflicts or perceived conflicts around that. And then January 23rd, we're going to have another amazing editor panel with editors from New York Magazine, KFF Health News, and other national publications on how to get into their pages, virtual or real. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Have a wonderful weekend. Be well, and we'll see you at the next IIJ event.